This Officer Don Memorial Podcast update is brought to you by our friends at the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast.
Check out the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast, which started as a podcast in 2017. It's a syndicated radio show broadcasting to millions of people every week. Crime and or trauma stories from those that have been there. Hosted by a retired police sergeant. Find the Law Enforcement Today podcast on major podcast platforms or online at letradioshow.com. That's letradioshow.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Scott, and I just want to take a minute to thank all of our subscribers and our listeners for your patience while we've been gone the last few months. We're getting back to work now after a few months off from moving. My wife and I moved to a different home. We also moved her business, and we did a complete remodel of the home over the last several weeks, including building a new studio for the podcast. And the studio turned out amazing, so it's finally time to get back to work, sharing stories of our fallen heroes. And this next one takes us back to 1992. Where tensions between African Americans and police across the country were running hot all summer long after widespread violence erupted in Los Angeles in the aftermath of the acquittal in April of 4 white Los Angeles police officers in the videotaped beating of Rodney King. Minneapolis, Minnesota was like many communities across the country since the Rodney King incident. The riots in LA fueling tensions that were already high in Minnesota's largest city. A city struggling with violent gang activity, a growing drug trade, and record homicide numbers. This trend would eventually earn Minneapolis the nickname Murderapolis after record homicide numbers in the early 90s. It was early Friday morning in Minneapolis when shots rang out on the corner of Lake Street and 17th Avenue South.
Police and fire. Pizza Shack. 23 East Lake. We got a cop that was just shot here. Where on the body? We need an ambulance quick. I don't know where he's been shot. All I know is he's down. Is he inside or outside? He's inside. 1623 East Lake Street? 1623 East Lake. Pizza Shack. Hold on the line. Hello, what's going on? We're servicing my... There's been a shooting. There's 2 black guys just came in and shot 2 cops. Okay, 2 cops.
Minneapolis would lose one of their most senior officers, 53-year-old Jerry Haaf, who was working patrol that night.
21, ambulance code 3, ambulance rescue code 3, 17th and Lake Pizza Shack. Rescue ambulance coming code 3 at the Pizza Shack. Suspects are 2 black males that ran out the front door, have a report of 2 officers shot.
A gang-ordered murder of a cop in retaliation for an alleged assault of an elderly black man on a bus, the subsequent murder of an alleged informant, and a community afraid to serve on the jury. Even defendants afraid to testify, concerned the police wouldn't be able to protect them from the vice lords and their leader, Sharif Willis, who was implicated in Jerry's murder but never indicted. In this story, we'll take you back to 1992. We'll introduce you to the area, to the agency, the family, and then we'll walk you through how we lost this hero. Followed by a lengthy manhunt and trials, eventually convicting 3 of the 4 gang members who worked together to kill Jerry Haaf. Fast forward 30 years, one of these killers is now up for parole in November. Jerry was 53 years old. He'd served for 30 years in Minneapolis and was only months away from retirement. His family was sentenced to life without their beloved husband, their father, their grandfather, and they believe his killers should get no less time. Jerry's family needs your help to keep this one in prison where he belongs. So while we work on finishing Jerry's story, we encourage you to go to our website at www.officerdonmemorialpodcast.com. You can see the link in the notes and read about Jerry's murder. Check out the newspaper articles, check out the photos, and learn how you can help Jerry's family by sending your letter to the Minnesota Department of Corrections, encouraging the commissioner to deny Jerry's killer's parole request in November. It just takes a few minutes to submit a letter, and it will mean the world to Jerry's family to see all your support. We're still in the process of gathering all the details on Jerry's story, finding the folks who are involved, interviewing family members, interviewing friends and other officers. And the process for gathering public data from larger agencies like the Minneapolis Police Department is understandably a much slower process, but their administration's been great. They're helping us get all the information that we need. And the Jerry Haaf story is, like I said, it's one of the most complicated stories we've produced, and it's arguably one of the most important because of the parole hearing coming up in November. This family needs our help. So check it out on the website. The website address is in the notes. It's www.officerdownmemorialpodcast.com. And we want to thank John J. Wiley and the Law Enforcement Today radio program for being the sponsor of this upcoming show. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned. The Jerry Haaf story coming up in October, right here on the Officer Down Memorial Podcast.